You've heard the stories about the power of an HOA, but this one takes things to a whole new level. When Karen, the self-appointed HOA president, started targeting my lawn with ridiculous fines and vandalizing my property, I knew it wasn't just a power trip, it was personal. I didn't just sit back and let her ruin my life. I went after her in ways she never saw coming, exposing her dark secrets and taking down her entire operation. But Karen didn't know who she was messing with. Like, subscribe, and comment below if you've ever had a crazy HOA story or experienced something similar. Your support helps us continue bringing you these jaw-dropping stories. Stay tuned to find out how I ruined Karen's life and expose the truth. There's something special about a beautiful lawn. For me, it wasn't just about the green grass. It was my sanctuary, my pride and joy. I'd spent countless hours working on it, getting every blade of grass just right. Each row of flowers was carefully planned, each bush trimmed and shaped to perfection. My lawn wasn't just a patch of grass. It was a masterpiece. When I moved into Willow Creek Estates, I thought I had finally found peace, away from the chaos, away from the rules. I was tired of the city, tired of the constant noise, and tired of the endless HOA rules telling me how I should live. I had finally found a place where I could relax, put my feet up, and live life on my terms. But everything changed the day Karen came into the picture. Karen was a piece of work. She wasn't just another homeowner. She was the newly elected president of the HOA, and she had made it clear from the start that she intended to run the entire neighborhood. At first, it wasn't so bad. Just a few new rules here and there, a couple of reminders about lawn maintenance, and some complaints about garbage bins left out too long. But then she started coming for my lawn. The first violation came as a surprise, a bright yellow notice on my front door stating that my lawn didn't meet HOA standards. I thought it was a joke. My lawn was pristine. I had spent months perfecting it. But Karen didn't see it that way. According to her, my flower beds weren't uniform enough, and a few of my bushes were too wild for the neighborhood's aesthetic. I was livid. How could she possibly find fault with something so perfect? But when I tried to reach out to her, I was met with nothing but cold indifference. Karen was unbothered by my complaints, insisting that all lawn violations must be corrected immediately or I would face fines. Fines for my lawn? This was absurd. I refused to give in, thinking that if I just ignored her, she'd move on to another target. But Karen wasn't the type to back down. No, she wanted to prove something, and she wasn't going to let my perfect lawn stand in the way of her rules. A few weeks later, Karen sent another violation letter, this time claiming that my lawn had become a safety hazard. The grass was too long, the bushes too overgrown. My beautiful front yard, which had been a point of pride for me, was now being painted as a threat to the neighborhood. That's when the real damage began. One morning, I woke up to find that my hedge had been destroyed, completely torn up, with chunks of it left scattered across my driveway. The damage wasn't accidental. It was clear someone had taken the time to cut it down deliberately, and it looked like it had been done with no respect for the property. I checked my security cameras, and sure enough, there was Karen's car, parked right in front of my yard in the middle of the night. She had sent one of her HOA lackeys to do the dirty work, and they had done exactly as she instructed. They cut down my hedge, all to make an example of me. This was no longer just about a lawn. This was personal. I had had enough. No more playing nice. I wasn't just going to let Karen get away with this. I was going to fight back. But I needed to be smart about it. I couldn't just confront her directly. She would only use that against me. Instead, I needed to dig deep, find out what she was really up to, and then expose her for the fraud she truly was. The moment I realized this was more than just about my lawn, I knew I had to dig deeper into Karen's activities. She wasn't just some petty HOA president making life miserable for the residents. She had something else going on, something far more sinister. I started with the basics, researching Karen's history in the neighborhood, looking into how long she'd been president, and checking any public records I could find. The deeper I dug, the more I started seeing a disturbing pattern. Karen had been quietly orchestrating deals with developers to buy up properties in the neighborhood. And from what I could tell, she was trying to take over. I had to find out more. Who was she working with? What was her end game? The HOA rules, the fines, the targeting of certain homes. It all started to make sense. Karen wasn't just controlling the neighborhood for fun. She was helping developers gain control of the land, buying properties on the cheap, and setting the stage for a massive land grab. I couldn't believe it. Here I was thinking she was just some nosy HOA president, and instead, I had stumbled onto something far worse, a corrupt scheme that could cost homeowners their homes, their land, and their freedom. I knew I needed hard evidence. So I did what any good neighbor would do. I started to keep my eyes open and take notes. Over the next few weeks, I followed Karen's movements, keeping track of her meetings and those she was meeting with. I talked to other homeowners, asking subtle questions, pretending to be concerned about the rules, when in reality, I was gathering intel. I also made sure to keep an eye on her unofficial meetings, the ones she didn't report to the HOA board. One evening, while taking a walk around the neighborhood, I stumbled upon something I hadn't expected. Karen was sitting at a local cafe, talking with a developer, someone I recognized as the owner of a company that had been trying to buy out several properties in the area. The conversation was supposed to be private, but they weren't exactly whispering. What I overheard made my stomach turn. Once we get rid of the non-compliant homes, we can buy them out for next to nothing, the developer said. Karen, you'll get your cut, of course. We'll tear them down and build something new. It'll be great for the neighborhood. Karen smiled, a sly grin that made me shiver. It's time for a change. Some of these people won't want to leave, but I've got ways of convincing them. We just need to handle a few more things, and everything will fall into place. I quickly realized what Karen's plan was. She was using her position as HOA president to force homeowners out, especially those who weren't compliant, with her vision of what the neighborhood should look like. She was encouraging them to sell, driving down property values with her absurd fines and threats, and convincing them to take low offers from developers who had no intention of preserving the neighborhood's charm. All of this was leading up to a massive gentrification project that would make her and the developers a lot of money. That was it. I had enough. I wasn't going to sit back and watch this happen, not when I had the power to stop it. Now that I had the proof, I needed to figure out the next step. I couldn't just expose Karen and the developers without careful planning. But I knew I had to act fast. I began setting up a trap, something that would bring all their dirty secrets into the light. I wasn't just going to expose Karen's corruption. I was going to take her down once and for all. Now that I had the evidence I needed to bring Karen and the developer's scheme into the light, it was time to set my trap. I knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight, and I couldn't just confront her head-on. If I did, she would have plenty of time to cover her tracks or shift the blame onto someone else. No, I needed to be strategic. I had to expose her publicly and in a way she couldn't deny. The first step was to organize a community meeting. It had been a while since the HOA had a large, open meeting with residents, and I knew Karen would be expecting everyone to just go along with her plans. But this meeting was going to be different. It wasn't just going to be about lawn rules or neighborhood maintenance. This was going to be a showdown. I reached out to several neighbors who had been frustrated with Karen's constant interference but hadn't known what to do about it. I shared the evidence I had uncovered with them, the developer's plans, Karen's illegal dealings, and the way she had been using the HOA to manipulate property values in her favor. They were outraged and ready to back me up. With enough support, I could make sure Karen's corruption was exposed to the whole community. But I didn't stop there. I knew that to truly destroy Karen's influence, I needed to hit her where it hurt the most, her reputation. I had been doing my homework, and I found out that Karen had a few personal skeletons in her closet. She had a history of making shady deals with business partners in the past, and it looked like her unsavory connections extended beyond the HOA. I contacted a few local journalists, ones I knew had covered real estate and corruption stories before. They were more than happy to help expose Karen. I gave them all the details, carefully documenting her history with the developers and her manipulation of the neighborhood. They could take it from there. The plan was simple. Stage the community meeting, get Karen in front of an audience of homeowners, and then drop the bombshell. I would present all the evidence, then let the media take it from there. The news would spread quickly, and once the story went public, Karen's reign of terror would be over. The night of the meeting arrived, and I was nervous but ready. The tension in the room was palpable as dozens of neighbors filled the community center. Everyone was eager to hear what the HOA had to say about recent changes in Karen's policies. I knew that if Karen saw this as just another HOA meeting, she'd never see what was coming. As the meeting began, Karen opened with her usual speech about community unity and maintaining standards, but I could see the cracks in her armor. She knew something was up, though she couldn't put her finger on it. I waited for the right moment. When she started talking about neighborhood changes and property guidelines, I stood up, calmly walked to the front, and asked to speak. The room went silent as Karen's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting this. "Karen, I have something you need to see," I said, pulling out a large folder from under my arm. I opened it, revealing photos, documents, and emails, each piece of evidence showing her illegal dealings with the developer, her secret meetings, and the personal financial gains she stood to make by destroying the homes in the neighborhood. The room gasped as I laid everything out, exposing her for the fraud she was. Karen's face turned pale, and she began to stammer, trying to defend herself. But it was too late. The damage had been done. As the meeting turned into chaos, the reporters I had contacted stood up, recording everything. They began asking Karen questions, digging deeper into her past, and exposing her shady history with other business ventures. It didn't take long before Karen's credibility was shattered, and she had no way to recover. By the time the meeting ended, Karen was practically running out the door. Her reputation was ruined, and the community was outraged by what they had learned. The developer's plan to buy up properties was exposed as a scam, and the entire neighborhood rallied to stop it. I had done it. Karen's power was gone, and Willow Creek Estates was safe. The aftermath of the community meeting was nothing short of chaotic. Within hours, Karen's once untouchable position as HOA president had collapsed. Word spread like wildfire. Neighbors were talking, social media was buzzing, and the local news stations picked up the story. Karen's corruption was no longer just a rumor. It was a fact, and the entire neighborhood had seen the proof. The developer who had been working with Karen, they immediately backed out of their plans, realizing the negative attention would ruin their reputation. Karen's secret land grab was exposed, and now, instead of being an ally to the developer, she was a liability. It didn't take long for the company to announce they were pulling out of any further negotiations. The HOA board, under intense pressure from the community, met the next day to discuss what action to take. Karen was removed from her position as president, effective immediately. Her resignation was swift, but the damage was done. Not only had she lost her job, but she had also lost her trustworthiness, her authority, and her position of power in the community. It was the end of her reign, but that wasn't enough for me. As much as I wanted to sit back and enjoy my victory, I knew there was still one more thing I had to do. Make sure Karen faced the consequences for the damage she had caused. I filed a report with the local authorities, detailing Karen's fraudulent activities, her dealings with the developers, and her manipulation of HOA funds. There was no way I was going to let her walk away without facing the music. Karen didn't take her downfall quietly. In the weeks following her ousting, she tried to defend herself, claiming that she had been misunderstood, but no one was buying it. The community had seen her true colors, and they were ready to make sure she never held power again. I even found out that Karen had tried to contact a few neighbors behind the scenes, attempting to convince them to support her comeback. She was trying to recruit allies and spin her version of the story. But this time, the community was too strong. They had witnessed firsthand how far she would go to manipulate people, and they weren't about to let her back into their lives. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was a fraud, and once the truth came out, the entire neighborhood stood united against her. No amount of backdoor deals or manipulation could save her now. The HOA, the community, and even the developers had all seen her for what she truly was, and the support I'd gathered was enough to make sure Karen wouldn't be able to harm anyone else again. She might have thought she could get away with her power trip, but the community's strength and the truth had brought her down. Her power had crumbled, and the neighborhood had emerged stronger than ever, united against her manipulation. With Karen ousted and her reputation in tatters, I knew the battle wasn't over. She had caused too much chaos and damage to the neighborhood, and it was time for her to face the full consequences. I wasn't satisfied with just seeing her removed from her position as HOA president. I wanted to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone ever again. I began to gather a coalition of neighbors, those who had been affected by Karen's reign and those who had supported me during the entire ordeal. Together, we came up with a plan to ensure that Karen's manipulation couldn't continue elsewhere. It was time to call attention to everything Karen had done and hold her accountable. I contacted the local news station that had covered her downfall, giving them even more details about her underhanded dealings. I didn't just want to expose her as a bad HOA president. I wanted the world to know about her corrupt practices with developers and her attempts to force homeowners to sell their properties. The story was picked up by the media again, but this time it wasn't just about her being a bad HOA president. It was about her corrupt business dealings, fraud, and coercion. I made sure that Karen's personal actions beyond just the HOA violations, were out in the open. She was publicly called out for trying to manipulate the entire neighborhood for her own benefit, and the story spread like wildfire across social media. With the media now covering her every move, Karen had no place left to hide. Her reputation was in ruins, and she had no allies left to help her. But my ultimate revenge was making sure that Karen couldn't run for another position of power again. I filed an official complaint with the city council, detailing how she had used her position for personal gain and abused her power for years. I pushed for a permanent ban on Karen holding any official roles in local government or HOAs, ensuring that she would never again be able to manipulate people or destroy neighborhoods. The final blow came when I reached out to the developer who had worked with Karen and got them to revoke all contracts with her. With her business dealings exposed and her connections severed, Karen was left with nothing. No job, no influence, and no allies. As I watched Karen's downfall play out in the public eye, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about getting revenge on one person. It was about taking down a system of corruption that had affected the lives of so many homeowners. It was about proving that no one is above the law, and when you abuse your power, you'll eventually face the consequences. The neighborhood was finally free. No longer under the thumb of a corrupt HOA president who had tried to manipulate us for her own gain. Karen's empire was completely destroyed, and I was proud to be part of the community that stood up and fought back. And that's how Karen's reign of terror came to an end. From using her HOA power to intimidate homeowners to trying to manipulate the entire neighborhood for personal gain, she thought she could get away with it. But in the end, the truth came out and justice prevailed. Like, subscribe, and comment below if you've ever dealt with a Karen, an HOA nightmare, or someone who thought they could control your life. Let us know your stories. We love hearing how you've stood up for yourself. Your support keeps these stories alive, and we can't wait to bring you more unbelievable tales of revenge. Thanks for watching, and remember, when you expose the truth, you always win.